these projections continue right on these exponential trajectories. And as we've made the transistors cheaper, they're better because they're faster. So the cost of a transistor cycle has come down by half every year. That really represents a 50% deflation rate, not inflation, but deflation in information technology, meaning you can buy twice as much information technology a year later as you could the previous year. And if you don't believe that, pick up a newspaper from a year ago and look at what digital cameras or digital music players or personal computers cost a year ago for the same capabilities, and you see that you can buy twice the capability now for the same price, or the same capability for half the price. And economists sometimes worry about deflation. In the current economic crisis, some economists are worried about deflation. We had massive deflation during the American Depression in the 1930s. The concern is that people won't actually double their consumption year after year if you can get twice as much stuff for the same cost. But actually what we find in information technology is people more than double their consumption. They've actually increased their consumption 18% in constant dollars or constant currency year after year, despite the fact you can get twice as much capability for the same price every year. This has been going on for 50 years. And the reason for that, as price performance reaches certain levels, whole new applications just explode. People didn't buy iPods for $10,000, which is what it would have cost 15 years ago. So when that became affordable, that application just exploded. And we see that in application after application. If you remember 15 years ago, if somebody took out a mobile phone in a movie, this was a signal that that person was a member of the power elite, because only someone very wealthy could afford a portable phone. They were called satellite phones. They were the size of a brick, and they didn't work very well. And it then took us 10 years to put out the first billion cell phones around the world. We then put out the second billion in 3 years, and then we put up the third billion in 1 year. And now there's 3 billion cell phones in the world, and half the world has a cell phone. I just got back from China, and half the farmers in China now have cell phones. And they're not just cell phones. They are very powerful computers that can access all of human knowledge with a few keystrokes. And they're very powerful devices that are helping people start educational systems and healthcare systems. They are becoming very common now in Africa. The internet is really everywhere in the world, including the poorest areas of the world, like sub-Saharan Africa. And this is really leading to economic growth. The World Bank reported that poverty in Asia has been cut by half in the last 10 years because of this information technology, and will be cut by 90% at current rates over the next 10 years. And Africa is only is very close to those kinds of progressions. And the biotechnology revolution is really revolutioning our own health and longevity. And we see the same kind of progressions. The cost of sequencing DNA has come down by half every year. It was $10 in 1990. It's 1/1000th of a cent today. The amount of genetic data we've sequenced has doubled every year. This slope on this logarithmic graph represents a smooth and very predictable doubling every year of the amount of genetic data that we've sequenced. Communication technology is doubling in power every year. The number of bits we move around the internet, the size of the internet, measured many different ways, is doubling every year. And this is a very democratizing technology. When I wrote my first book in the 1980s, the Soviet Union was then going strong, and I predicted that the Soviet Union was doomed because of the democratizing effects of decentralized electronic communication. And indeed, the Soviet Union was swept away by the clandestine network of email, over teletype machines, early blogs, fax machines, and so on. And the whole wave we saw towards democracies in the 1990s was fueled by the rise of the internet. And it's also very democratizing in terms of the tools of creativity. If you want to create a full-length motion picture today, you can do that with a $500 high-definition camera on your personal computer. Or you can create a recorded album with the equivalent of $1 million of recording equipment of 10 years ago. A couple of kids at Stanford wrote some software on their $1,000 notebook computers and revolutionized web search and started Google and created a company worth $100 billion. And they did that with devices that cost $2,000. So really everybody has in their hands today the means to make changes in the world, both culturally and technologically. And all of this is scaling up at an exponential pace. And it's really all around the world. Everybody is participating in this. And there's many different ways to measure this. I mean, here's a graph of traffic on the internet. We just updated this to 2007. Very smooth exponential growth, doubling every year. Here's a graph I had of the internet. I had a little piece of this in the 1980s, just the left-hand piece of it. It wasn't even called the internet. It was called the ARPANET, the predecessor to the internet. And nobody had heard of it. It was only used by a few thousand scientists. But I saw that this would continue to double, and I projected this World Wide Web emerging in the 1990s. If you look at the same data on a linear scale, it looks like this. So to the casual observer, it looked like the internet came out of nowhere in the mid-1990s, but you could see it coming if you looked at the exponential progression. We're shrinking technology at an exponential pace, and we're making technology smaller by a factor of 100 in 3D volume every decade. And we're actually building these devices now at the molecular level. There's already, as I mentioned, 50 experiments of blood cell-sized devices in the blood cells of animals that are keeping them healthy and inside. These are early experiments today, but these are scaling up at an exponential manner. This is a design of a red blood cell, a robotic version of a red blood cell that actually could replace your biological red blood cells. And this has been analyzed very carefully, and an analysis of these indicates if you were to replace a portion of your red blood cells with these little robots called respirocytes, you could do an Olympic sprint for 15 minutes without taking a breath, or you could sit at the bottom of your pool for 4 hours. And it really brings up an interesting observation about biology. Biology is very clever, it's very intricate, but it's also very suboptimal. And we're finding that as we actually understand how biology works, this is called reverse engineering biology, we can redesign biology to be a lot more powerful. And these respirocytes are thousands of times more capable than our biological red blood cells. We do our thinking using interneuronal connections that compute 200 calculations per second. That's 1,000,000 times slower than our computers today. So ultimately, we can make these processes much more powerful. And we will have plenty of computation at very low cost as we go through the 21st century to do things like, for example, simulate the human brain. But then the question is, will we have the software of human intelligence? Or will we just be, very fast but dumb calculators? And first of all, I would point out that there's many examples of artificial intelligence already in use today. Sometimes people ask me, well, whatever happened to artificial intelligence? And it reminds me of people that go into the rainforest and say, where are all the species that are supposed to be here, when there's 25 species of ants within 50 feet of them, but you don't see them because they're hidden in the ecostructure. And artificial intelligence is hidden in our modern economic infrastructure today. Every time you send an email or connect a cell phone call, intelligent algorithms route the information. Pick up any product, and it was designed in part with intelligent computer-assisted design software, manufactured in robotic factories. Intelligent algorithms automatically detect credit card fraud. If you get an electrocardiogram, there'll be an automated diagnosis from the computer that's actually better than what doctors can do. The same for blood cell images. And I can mention 100 other applications of intelligent software that are performing tasks that used to be done by intelligent humans and are now done by machines at equal levels. Now, these are narrow applications. These computers can do certain things, and they don't have any expertise outside of that area. But the narrowness is gradually getting broader. And what is fueling this is a understanding of how the human brain works. And that's called reverse engineering the human brain. And that's also an exponential progression. We're doubling the spatial resolution of brain scanning every year. We're doubling the amount of data we're getting about the brain every year. And we're also showing that we can take this data and understand it and build computer models and simulations of how the brain works, and then test those simulations, and we get similar results as applying those same tests to human capabilities.